All right, we are back for tutorial 3, and we're gonna make a method because we have a sort of repeating theme of using a line here and also using another line break sorts together, and this will essentially make it easier to do that without having to copy and paste and make the whole thing messy. Okay, so first of all, we're inside a class here called program. All right, so inside this class is a method here, the main method. This is what runs on the start of the program. Here's some startup arguments. We don't have to worry about that. We can get into that type of stuff later. So we need another method. So we can minimize this just by doing that. And then down below here, we can go public void line. All right, so we have a method now that's called line. To insert a line is the idea behind it. And the reason why it's a void, so you can see here, this little thing that says void is saying that it does not return a value. So if this was string, let's say, you would do something like return some sort of string value. So this could be whatever you put in there, or it could be another variable that you affect. But we don't need it to return a value, we just need it to perform an action, so it's going to be void. Public is just how accessible it is, so that means that it can be used outside of this program class. We'll get into classes later. You could also just leave this void because we're just going to use it in here, so it doesn't really matter. You could call it private. Private means that it's only usable inside of this class. That's something that I'll cover later when we create a class to build these type of stories out of. So we don't have to worry about that right now. So we'll just say public. All right, we can open up this method now. And let's go ahead and copy this set here. And then what I'm going to do here is add console.writeLine on the top as well, so that it gives spacing both on the top and the bottom. And what this will do is it'll allow us to essentially make it look neat. So anyways, so we will add line here. Oh, and because this is static, it probably wants a static method to be used inside here, so static. All right, now it can be used. So the thing about static, and I should probably cover this just because that might be confusing to some new people, and since this is, targeted at new people, static essentially says at what point the resources are allocated for the program. So if you have static here, it means the resources inside of this method and for this method are allocated at the beginning of the program and not on runtime. So, or I should say on runtime and not during the execution. So some things, the resources will not be allocated until that method or function is called. And other things at this immediately upon the startup of the program, there are resources allocated for. So this is something where the resources are allocated at the beginning, not during. That's the basic idea. And because this method uses static and is therefore allocating resources at the beginning, things inside of it that are other methods or whatever need to be static. Not the same for variables, but because they're already classed as static through this. But anyways. So what we'll do here is now we can copy and paste a shorter line instead of a longer line. So really important here. And we can just replace all these sort of things that happen with that. And then let's go ahead and run this so you can see sort of the difference. Spelled succeeded. It should pop up here at any moment. There we go. wait for it to get going. There we go. All right, what is my name? Brandon. It says, hello, Brandon. You find yourself in a forest. What do you do? Okay, and you can see here we have a line showing up. But there's an extra spacing here. And that's because we still have the right line here because, anyways. And I think, let me see here. How much spacing is 2? That's kind of interesting. Oh, right, because this has a spacing there. I'm not sure how much spacing I want to give it. I might consider expanding the spacing on the bottom to make it even. So basically the reason why the spacing is showing up here is because this character here, the little dash or underscore, appears at the bottom of the character spacing. So you can see this little block here, the white block as I'm selecting. The dash appears at the very bottom of it. So you have all this extra space. It doesn't appear in the middle, which is why it looks kind of weird. Like for instance, if this was replaced with a bunch of these characters, they show up at approximately the middle. So you'd see the spacing now looks even between it. So I might, to solve that problem, I might just make this a bunch of these characters. All right, now it looks a little bit nicer. So, and then probably we'll want another spacing there. So we can stop this program and then write on what is your name. We can say not here, but here. Just type in line. Okay, so when we type in line, we're referencing the function below. And what we need to do is, because this function has no parameters, or this method has no parameters, we just have open closed parentheses, and then a semicolon to indicate the end of that instruction. However, we could add something in here like string value, and then instead of putting this in here, and I'll just Control X, save it there so I can copy it back in, we could put value. Now, what does this do? It means that whatever value you place in here will get placed here. So you can see all these ones are breaking now. So if I do, and I grab this over here, and say, add it to here, we can do it like this, for instance. Now, you might be like, well, why would you do that? Well, sometimes you might want a different type of character in here. So let's say sometimes you want parallel lines, and sometimes you want dashes. Well, what do we got here? Well, we have parallel lines to divide it, and here we have dashes. But you might be thinking to yourself, this is pretty annoying to do this repetitive thing where you type out a bunch of the same character and have to count to whether it's the same length or not. So we're actually going to solve that right now. So how do we solve this? Well, we go here, don't need this anymore, and we add a for loop. And now what a for loop does is it has a certain number of iterations. So we could say maybe we'd like 20 characters, and then I++. Okay, so you might be wondering, what does that do? So what happens is we set an integer variable called I, which starts out being equal to 0. So it starts out as 0, and then it checks to see if I is less than 0, or if 0, being I, is less than 20. I is less than 20. Okay, because 0 is less than 20. Well then, it will perform the action, so this happens next, and we'll probably want to change this to a console write, so that we don't have a bunch of lines stacked on top of each other. We just want them next to each other, parallel. All right. So it puts a character down. Then it goes back up here, and it says, is I still less than 20? Well, this little thing here, the ++ indicates that that integer increased by 1 value. So if I was 0, it's now 1. And it says, okay, is 1 less than 20? And it says, yep, 1's less than 20. It puts another character down, and it repeats this until you have a whole line of characters. Okay. But now that we've added this as a right and not a right line, we need to add another right line in to make sure that we have that extra spacing still, because this normally would have a spacing on it. So, well, let me think about that, because it's possible it doesn't matter. We'll do it without first, because I think we do need it. So we'll find out. All right, so what we're saying is put a list of, or a line of characters that's 20 in a row of this value. So what does that mean? It means we can reduce this down to a single character and say we have a line of this. So now, when we run it, you'll see, oh look, that's 20 characters. That's 20 characters. That's 20 characters. All right, so maybe you want to add another variable here. That variable is going to be an int, an integer, so a full number, so no decimal places. And we'll say, we'll call this int length, or for length. So this is the length that we want. And we'll replace 20, instead of being a static value, or well, an unchanging value, it'll be whatever we type in here. Now we can go to here and we can say, actually, we wanted 45 characters. And then we'll go ahead and edit all these to be 45. Let's see, is there any? Yes, here. All right, I'm gonna run it. And now you see we have 45 characters. Well, this is a little bit short of our text, and we kind of want it out here a bit. So that looks like it might be 60 or 70. So I think we'll change this value to 70. But now we're just going through and changing all these values one by one to 70, and that's really annoying. So what we're going to add here is another integer. And we're going to say this is going to be the length. And we'll say it's equal to 70. And then what we want to do is just copy this and replace all these with that variable. And then what that does is now every single one of these will copy from this value. So now it's 70. They're all 70. And now you can imagine that maybe you're like, well, maybe we want it a little bit larger, or maybe we want it really large, like 120. Now it's 120. Now all we had to do is change this one number instead of all of them. So it's just more efficient for the coder. I think 70 was fine. I think that's a good place to start it at. We can worry about lengths later. Okay. Now we can make lines of characters, which is cool. You guys got to learn a bit about the for loop. And it turns out, now let's check here again, make sure I didn't do something wrong. But yes, you do actually want this extra console.write line. So the reason you want the extra console.write line is because we only have console write here, which we had console write line before. So there was a total of 3 line breaks previously, because there was write line, write line, write line. But now there would only be 2 if we didn't add this one in. So now there's still 3. Okay. So going on from here, we can see that we have now functions with parameters. And these parameters can just determine anything. Like we could change this to, we could even make it double. If it's double and it goes on for the same length, it will be double the length. So, so whatever you put in here, no matter how long, will get duplicated over the period of the length.